Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tonight we're talking about blood moons. You've heard about the blood moons. One of the things that they're telling us is that this is the month. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to watch these things unfold. And as we do, we are going to be witnessing God at work, bringing a conclusion to the events of our life. There's at least one person who has taken this, I can't remember who it is off the top of my head, and extrapolated from this that September 23rd, which if my memory serves would be the beginning of Feast of Tabernacles, is the first day of the Great Tribulation. And it may actually be the fellow who wrote the book on the blood moons. I'm not exactly sure. But the way this all works out, and one of the fascinating things, I found an article this week that was actually talking about the events that were going to take place in 2014, which clearly did not. And you would think that this would kind of set people up for something. But there's a quotation from Revelation chapter 12, looking at this and saying, "There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered." This is what starts this discussion last year about these blood moons and how all of this is bringing together the rapture of the church, perhaps, or at least the beginning of the tribulation, the beginning of the end of days, as God is bringing all this to a conclusion. The problem is that Revelation 12 is about Israel. It's not about the church. And so it gets a little bit strange along the way. It says on September 23rd, 2017, there's an astronomical alignment that only occurs on that day. It's never apparently happened before. The constellation Virgo will be clothed in the sun. There will be 12 stars that crown her. Jupiter, the king of planets, will be exiting underneath all of that, as they characterize it, through her legs, as if giving birth to it, that she is giving birth to Jupiter. And this is a very precise and exact alignment. And he says, if this is the fulfillment of the Revelation 12 prophecy, then we have to back everything up 3.5 years from September 2017 to see the beginning of the Great Tribulation. That puts it in March or April of 2014. I wrote next to it, didn't happen. Didn't happen. But beginning in 2014, there was the beginning of these blood moons. And these blood moons have just stirred all kinds of speculation. The popularity of this event through two books. One is called Blood Moons. Pastor Mark Biltz has written a book on this. John Hagee wrote on this same subject. In fact, he got a lot of grief because it was like he was stealing it. People wanted to say that he was picking up what this guy and doing it, and he's it's really not like that, but And then there's also the book of the mystery of the Shemitah by Jonathan Cahn, Rabbi Cahn. He's the one that wrote the book called Harbinger. He's just made a lot of money off of this and a lot of popularity, and he just gets invited all kinds of places, and people just are loving this. He has captivated American evangelicalism. And it's not even certain that he is an evangelical. I don't know what he is. He calls himself a rabbi, but folks, the church where he pastors a church, but it has Jewish overtones, and I'm not quite sure what it is. The blood moons highlight specific events in the life of Israel according to the book. They've taken computer programs, NASA programs, that have charted the heavens and have gone back in time to see what the heavens would have looked like. They've gone all the way back at least to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And they say that there are biblical events, 70 AD, the destruction of the temple, and others that correspond to these blood moons. The holidays, the Hebrew holidays, especially in the spring and the fall, we have our Easter, they have Passover, they also have the big September, the high holy days in September, where they celebrate their new year, they celebrate the Day of Atonement. They have no way to celebrate the Day of Atonement. They have no temple, they have no altar, they have no priesthood, they have no sacrifice, but they celebrate it anyway. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, which the Bible says Christians are going to celebrate in the millennium, along with Israel on the earth. The Shemitah is apparently a reference, it's a Hebrew term, referencing God's requirement that the land be rested 1 year out of every 7. If you do that for 10 times, that's 70 years. So 70 becomes a really significant number, is a significant number in biblical numerology, but it's 10 of these Shemitahs. 10 is a really interesting number as well. These are prophetically significant. Israel, specifically Judah and Benjamin, back in the day, were condemned to Babylonian captivity. The captivity was prophesied to last 490 years. Why that number? That was because they had failed to celebrate this 1 year out of 7 where the land rests, the Shemitah, as long as they'd been in the land. So it was 1 year for every failure. 490 failures, apparently. This is pretty much as long as Israel had been in the land. The theory here is that we are finishing a 70-year cycle. This last year, which ended with today, was the end of that sabbatical year, that day of rest. It has been 68 years since the establishment of the modern state of Israel. You're starting to see that 2017 coming back. God has demonstrated himself, according to this theory and what they've researched, often in multiples of 70-year cycles. And so it's not clear just when the church is going to be raptured, if at all. And these fellows in their books and stuff make no effort to rectify or to reconcile any of that. They leave that alone. But the Great Tribulation could theoretically be right around the corner. Confirmation in some people's minds has been found in the Pope's visit to the United States. He's going to arrive in Washington the day before the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles. He's going to come on September 22nd. He's going to make an historic address to the joint session of Congress 2 days later on the 24th. He's going to do an outdoor mass in the historic section of Philadelphia, an outdoor mass on the 27th. He's going to speak to the United Nations, to the gathering of the nations of the earth. First time that a pope has done this, apparently, and he's going to do that on the 30th of September. And the significance here in the minds of these folks is that they believe the Pope of Rome corresponds to the Antichrist of the book of Revelation. And all that feeds into this scenario. One commentator, as I said, is pointing, I said the 23rd, he's pointing to the start of the Great Tribulation on September 28th, the day after the Pope speaks at the United Nations. No, I could take that back. The day after the Mass in Philadelphia, 2 days before he speaks to the United Nations. Now, I had some questions. Maybe you have questions. One question was, since 70 years after the founding of modern Israel falls at the end of 2017, how does that play into the 70-year cycle that we're all excited about in 2015? Well, it has to do with the blood moons. That's what they're happening now. But then you have to extrapolate out a little bit further, and you just play with it, you see, because God's economy or God's calendar is not all that precise. You know, God's dealing in a much larger venue than you are. So it's not going to happen at the stroke of midnight on the 28th or whatever. It's somewhere in it. It's going to be maybe by the 26th. I don't know. Another question was, if Jesus said there would be no signs of his coming except the sign of Jonah, he said that in Matthew when he was telling his disciples about things that were going to be happening. Why is all this credibility being given to these signs? Jesus said, an evil and adulterous nation seeks after a sign, and there will be no sign except the sign of Jonah, which we already got. It's the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, as he was 3 days in the belly of the fish. There was prophecies leading up, pointing to the Messiah, pointing to the cross, pointing to redemption. But from that point on, there's nothing. There's no signs. Well, I'm sure they would answer it by saying that there are no signs of his coming, but these are signs of the Great Tribulation. And of course that happens before his coming. 7 years, with some less. All of this is fueling a lot of minds, a lot of people, a lot of speculation. I'm not sure it's creating any new information or it's moving people to a stronger faith. I think it's just fascinating. And I don't think that God is into fascination, do you? None of this stuff is going to pan out, in my view, the way it's all being presented. In part because of the hype, because this is all speculation. This is all, you know, getting the troops all riled up over something. It's not what God does. When God moves, people go, "Oh, look at that." He doesn't necessarily telegraph. But you say, his people, paying attention, looking at the scriptures, they'll know. The other people won't know, but God's people will know. Me? Bible says, be busy about my Father's work. And when the trumpet sounds, you'll be gone. Till then, I'm not involved.